probably will get notified that it's recording.
Yep.
Great. So today we're very pleased to have Ruth with us, Ruth Smalley from Edge Hill University. And she's going to be talking to us about some of the things that she's been doing with data from Talis Aspire, particularly in Google Data Studio.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And yeah, I'm just going to hand over to you.
Okay, that's
Thank
great.
you.
I'll start my presenting and try that. I'll view my entire screen on this one. So, as I'd said, I am. Where am I going for? That's right. Yes. Share. That might cause some slight strangeness. So I'm presenting today. What you're going to see on this screen is from my remote desktop at Edge Hill, although I'm obviously working at home, so you can hear me from my own personal laptop and seeing, hopefully, what's going on my laptop at work. Not my laptop, my desktop. So hoping it works. And if I get confused at any point, that's why. So basically, I was just going to start with a little bit about why we use Google Data Studio. I previously worked in our learning technology team working on Blackboard, and when we went to SAS, we got access to the direct data from Blackboard, which was a SQL programming, and we were getting stuff out, and we wanted to be able to present it, and there was quite a lot of drive from the manager in that department at the time to be presenting the data in a better way. Now, there is Tableau within the university, but it's very, very locked down, and we weren't allowed to have access to it. So basically, we looked around for another solution. We didn't have business intelligence. We don't have access to any of those tools. So we looked around for an alternative, me and another girl in the learning technology team, and we came upon Google Data Studio, which had just come out of beta. I think it was out of beta. Was it still beta at that point? It was in its early days, and I started to use that. And one of the first things I used it for was just doing some simple things out of Google Analytics, which is the one you can see on screen there, which is just reading list data. Just shows some of the presentations that you can do with Google Data Studio in terms of time periods and things. And that table there is just using Google Analytics data, which is probably the quickest and easiest thing to do with Google Data Studio. It's very set up to take that data. You can take it in real time. And then that kind of sparked our interest in how this could be used, because the managers really like this. They like having the pie charts. They like having the little tables and things. So these things, we've got them for a variety of different things, from Google Analytics, that were on a big screen in the office, so people could see in real time who was using, how it was getting used in the previous 28 days and stuff. And beyond that, when I was moving into being the reading list and doing the data for the collections team within the library, I moved jobs. And I started to investigate how we could use this to present more detailed information. And there was a big drive. I wasn't involved when we set up Talis at Edge Hill. I wasn't at Edge Hill at that point, but there was a big drive then to get some data out of Talis. It was a big thing. We want to know how our reading lists are being used. We spent a lot of time and effort setting up the reading lists and engaging with the academics. And so I started looking at it. So I started off just pulling together data out of from the Talis stats itself, where you pull it down on Talis from the thing. So I was pulling down data and then spending a lot of time in Excel formatting it. And you can see from this one, all the green columns are ones where I was doing some Excel work, to all sorts of formulas in there, to VLOOKUPs, if errors, truncate, all sorts of things to pull through the data. And the only thing that we were producing then was this kind of massive table in the middle here, which was department by department, which was what they wanted to do, so they could go back to their departmental contacts and for their annual departmental reviews and say, X percentage of your reading lists of courses have got a reading list, and they've been reviewed this many times and that sort of thing. As you can see, it's a bit of a mess and a mash, this, and it's not terribly user friendly. So I started to look at what I could do with that data into Google Data Studio. And hopefully, if I hit the right button now, the next one along will be how this looks by month now. Sorry, that's one of the other pages. So basically, this is now the monthly overview. So this is across all departments within the, so this is just for the month of April across all departments, this table showing roughly just big bold numbers, how many published lists we've got, how many of those have got a list attached to them, and then the active modules, which is the ones that have actually got students enrolled on them. So, you know, this was the big figure that everybody liked. The 82.91 was like, oh, we've got lots of lists that they're. I'm not going to say about the quality or the quantity of those lists and everything, but it was a nice figure that pleased managers and things like that. I do still pull in, and then this is where the MIS database started to come in, because obviously the first spreadsheet I showed you there was from back in September. We got the data, the MIS data, in November, December, can't remember, around then, and I started playing around Christmas with using the MIS to produce some of those stats, which saved me a huge amount of time. So one of the things that we've got on this table, I've got 4 different pages on here. So I start off with some instructions, because there are some limitations to Google Data Studio. It's not as nice as Tableau is. As I understand Tableau, I don't know Tableau very well, and other things for filtering and setting broad spectrums over the data. So for this one, you have to set the month to start with. You can choose 1 month, you can choose more than one, but it will mess up these stats. Apart from at the end, when I'll show you when that comes into its own. So the first one is the month of April's, as a broad overview. And then I go to this one where you can select an individual department. So let's say social work for one top, and it will show you what social work have been doing, which is a little bit more drilled down. And then you can drill down into even further into individual module codes, should that be what you want to do. So let's say you wanted to see all the 4s, which will be generally postgrad, or it might be a 4th year of a 4-year degree, I'm not sure of that one. And you can start to see some of the more detailed things that some of them they've not been doing any, some of them have updated, some of them have published, and then have they had reviews? Only one of them's had a review. So it's those kinds of things that we were starting to look at and see a bit more detail about them. The student Blackboard clicks comes from as I said, we've got direct data with Blackboard, so I download those and I merge those into the stats manually. And the Google Analytics page views, again, I download them. They're not coming through live from Google Analytics on here. I download them and manipulate them into my big spreadsheet. So as I said, the MIS made this a lot easier. So here's my MIS, and this is the what am I trying to say? The SQL. Is it going to go bigger? Come on. There we go. It's a bit bigger. Hopefully you can see it a bit more. No, it's a bit small on that screen. One of the things with Google Data Studio is once you've uploaded 1 month's data or one set of things, you have to have the tables all have to be exactly the same. You can't take in and out a table in between. So very much this SQL is probably not what I would have written if I'd been writing it from scratch, but it was very much replicating what was already uploaded to Google Data Studio. And it was really nice to be able to do things. So just little things like I had an Excel query to pull out the course year thing. So you can see just there, the substring. I could do that in SQL and it made it a lot easier. The big thing that it really made it easier to do is that I could combine the hierarchies and so you can see I've got the join queries in my SQL to join the hierarchy and the department codes into my query, because obviously this was what I was always trying to get, was the department and the department name, because that's what's meaningful to the people who I was presenting this to, the managers and stuff. They didn't have a clue what DEP 002 was. They didn't have a clue what AC 1022, which department that was in. So that's what I really needed to be able to bring back. And being able to run the SQL so that it joins up those 2 tables was a huge advantage in that point. And that's really where I started doing this, and made my life a lot easier in that point of view. Subsequently, from having done this data and been quite well received, we've then moved on to look at our reading lists. We've been doing some work currently to look at our collections development policy and how we're going to hold that. Obviously slightly gone up in the air with COVID because we're going to a much more e-first now, but we're now looking at what our policy was put together in 2016, I think. So things have moved on quite a lot since then. We're looking at more EBAs, DDAs, all those things, evidence-based and direct and data-driven purchasing, and how we put that into our reading lists, and how many copies of a physical book we'll buy and when we'll buy and we wanted some data around that to back that up. So I'd come back to here, and let me find the right statement. Not that one. Got the wrong one. And I started to look at some. That's this one. Yes. Sorry, I'll make that a bit bigger as well. This was one looking at some time statuses, so using the event data that comes with the MIS. So looking at, is this the one? This is one of the ones I've done. That's only got the last 3 months. I've done one with 6 months as well, looking at how many clicks there were and downloading that data and then putting that into Google Data Studio. So I don't think that is the actual SQL. It's very similar SQL that I've put into Data Studio here, which is our reading, produced this table from it, which was items on reading lists from December to February. As you can see, I did this just before COVID hit, and I've not really had time to revisit it, unfortunately, since then, because yeah, it's all gone a bit mad. But you can see we've got the titles there and how many records there were attached to that thing. So that one's got a lot. So that's how many times it's been visited. I think, yes, that's how many times it had been visited. Looking at the recommended and essential, which is a big part of what we've been doing about what we're going to buy for essential, what we're going to buy for recommended, and then how those items are being used. And then the record count, that's the number of times that an event had happened, that it had been visited. So how, I mean, it's nothing earth-shattering there. There was a dip in December. It was higher at the start when there was exams, you know, but it's just having it in a visual form. What was quite nice on the second page of this was where you could break it down to individual lists. And I'll compare, my husband is an academic at Edge Hill as well, and these were his some of his modules that he was looking at. And REL 2001, the one with a lot of titles on it, was one they'd spent a lot of time using the week by week use of the reading list to break it down into weekly chapters and things like that. So he was interested in how that had impacted on the students actually engaging with the list and using those titles. So as you can see from this, they've got it's kind of a pick and mix module. So students have got a lot of choice over where they might take this module in terms of their own interests. In terms of Bible in the Modern World is his course there. So there's a lot of recommended titles, but he was really pleased to see that they were getting engaged with. And I think I also did some work for him on a week by week basis to see how they were being engaged with week by week. But then from our side, as a collections thing, we were looking at how these were tagged into Talis. So you can see we've got a lot of them coming up as ebooks, which was interesting to see. I'm not sure entirely where that's going with it. I think that might be some web pages and things like that. But then we could see that the LCN lookup, which is essential, the library search, which is the physical books, were really quite unimportant in this. They hadn't really been engaged with a lot. So it gave us some data to start to look at and to see how students were using these lists and how their usage was changing. You know, were they going to ebooks or were they going to the library? And it would start to be able to inform us in developing our collections policy by going, you know, there is a move to ease and ebooks and how that's going. So, you know, it's just some of the things. These are, so I actually threw these stats up here really quite quickly. I wrote a very quick and simple SQL query to download the data and then threw it into Google Data Studio to start seeing how I can manipulate it. A lot of the time at the moment, the Google Data Studio is trying to see what we can deduce from the data if you manipulate it in different ways, looking at it in different tables, applying different filters to see, you know, how that data looks with different interpretations put upon it and different ways of looking at the data. And so a lot of it's playing. Part of the problem at the moment is, obviously, especially now we're in COVID, is getting together with a group of people who are going to go out and actually use that data and go, is this useful to you? How would it be more useful? What sort of things do you want to go and talk to tutors and things about? And how can we produce the data that's going to support that. So that's probably my next big challenge in doing this. A little thing that I'm just doing at the moment where I'm using the MIS is we're starting to look at, again, in terms of the collections, but a far more focused thing on how we're using what we're going to do in September, because we're probably not going to be able to use our collection of physical books in the way we'd normally hope to. So we're starting to look at our ebook usage with ProQuest, with most borrowed books last September, and then also with what's on a reading list. So at the moment, I'm trying to juggle and find common keys between Talis, ProQuest, ebook data, and our library catalogue, which is Capita. And that's finding the common keys between those three is not always easy, because not everything's got the LCN. Sometimes between Talis and Capita, we can use the local call number, but not all the time. Titles don't match up. Capita truncates the titles when I pulled it down from their reporting database, which is something I've actually been working on. I ended up working on it this morning. So back in my SQL, I've got a new query that I was working on this morning. Let me make it a bit bigger. And you can see the first thing I've done is item title 55 to shorten the title to 55 characters, which is what's pulling back from Capita. Linking it back again to the hierarchy so we can put it into departments, because we're trying to look at which departments are going to be most impacted by the loss of physical books. We're kind of aware it's health and education to some extent, but trying to focus it down into which departments we need to go to. Where we've filled books with things from core text, vital source, that kind of thing, which we can see to some extent. We've not put it in terribly much into our reading list at the moment. We've put some core text titles in that we've got for free at the moment, and I think some vital source, but not much has been put into the reading list because we're quite a small team and I've not been able to engage with writing the lovely API queries that you've been looking at on here. I've just not had the time to implement that sort of thing. So we've got a fairly small amount of that stuff done there, but trying to plan and pull this across to try and see what's being used and what we might need to try and make cases for getting e-textbooks for September. And being able to go into the MIS and say just things like being able to truncate that title, because trying to do it in Excel is just a pain and you lose a lot of data, and it's just much quicker and easier to do it out here. Being able to link the department codes in has been really useful. And yeah, and so that's, I think, most of the things that I was going to say about what we've done with oops, sorry, notifications coming up, with what we've been doing with Google Data Studio and the MIS. So does anybody have any questions?
Don't be shy.
Hey Ruth, that was really interesting. I'm a bit curious about your latest task, looking at the things you need to replace print with E, and I'm wondering what sort of priorities you give to things being used versus things being on reading lists versus things existing on the catalogue.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we're trying to investigate and get to the bottom of at the moment is how we reconcile those three things. At the current time, we've been quite reactive, really. So if something's getting requested, we're trying to then find it. What we're trying to do for September is try and be a bit more proactive and try to look at probably sort of trying. I mean, that's part of what I'm trying to do with this thing, is trying to find that apex between those three things of where it's on a reading list. Is it essential, or is it just recommended, or is it being used? Because what we're seeing is quite a lot of things that are being highly used or that we're getting requests for are only on as recommended on reading lists. So then obviously then that's going back to the academics, which isn't our job in our team. That we have to send that to the academic engagement team to go back and maybe ask those questions of, you know, should this be essential? Because our previous collections policy was obviously, you know, we'd buy essential at a ratio of print for all students. whereas recommended we'd only probably buy 1 or 2 copies, depending on the number of students. And especially if we're going forward with e-textbooks, I suspect there's been a really nice paper circulated today on the resources listserv about the big problems with e-textbooks, which I'm sure we're all well aware of, the pricing models and how crazy that is at the moment. But come September, we're going to be finding that we're going to have the demand for that. So we need to be able to demonstrate the use case if we're going to put in a bid to our directorate for more money, because we haven't got the money in the book or the subscriptions budget at the moment to purchase those high cost items. So it's just trying to find some evidence, and I don't think we've made a decision yet on which of those 3 things is going to be the winner. I suspect it will be at some case who shouts loudest as well, but yeah, just trying to find some evidence behind that, and this is kind of our first steps at trying to find some evidence, because we've never really gone down that route so much before. It's always been a little bit, like I said, probably who shouted loudest at their academic engagement or their academic librarian, as it was in the past, would have won. And now we're trying to go down a bit more of a nuanced route with the actual data of this is what the students are actually doing, and this is how they're using the reading lists, and how they're accessing resources. I don't think we'll find the answer.
I know, it's really sensible. It's really good to be proactive about it. Arm yourself with it.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. I say whether we'll get there. Trying to match one of the big things we have is matching the data between the different data sources is proving quite problematic at the moment. For me, I did a big piece with ProQuest, trying to look at the purchasing model there, because we've got some DDA and some direct purchases and some subscriptions with ProQuest, different models of getting hold of ebooks, and yeah, trying to match up my data from the reading lists to ProQuest, how they describe the books, because obviously there's no call number between those two. I've tried titles, I've tried ISBNs, and I've still got lots and lots of gaps. So yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge at the moment, is linking different data sources. It's really nice what I can pull out of Talis, but it has to be able to match into but it's nice having the Talis where I can do some manipulation on it to try and get it back to what someone else is producing. It gives me some options on there.
Do we have any other questions for Ruth?
I don't have a question, but it was very interesting. It's given me lots of ideas. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Or just go on to say Google Data Studio. There are some data issues. Obviously, it's Google. They want control of your entire life and your things. So I tend to be a little bit careful at what I put up. Try not to put up anything personally identifiable. Try and keep it to broadly, okay, it could have some university-based thing, but you'd need to be able to hack it. And I'm not sure how much time and effort someone's going to go to get this data out of it, but I try not to put up email addresses if possible, just names. If I am doing anything with names, and it tends to keep it just to departmental data, I wouldn't probably be happy about putting anything with student details in it up there, because it's Google, and just being careful. You're not kind of completely in control of the data, just being aware of all those things. I would much prefer to have my lockdown version of Tableau or Business Intelligence, but we are where we are.
Yeah, that's a very good point with any third-party system is understanding what they're going to be doing with the data and what the controls are. Okay, well, thank you very much, Ruth. I've certainly learnt a lot from what you've showed us there. It's really interesting to see what people are doing with the data. we kind of have a bit of a, you know, make it available and see what happens kind of policy, really. And yeah, everybody's going to do something different with that. So thank you. I'm going to stop the recording at that point. If I can find the right button.